Ohio State is finally back in action for the first time since that loss to Oregon. We're going to talk about it in the boldest way imaginable. Well, maybe not too bold. We'll see what Andy Backstrom in the middle of your screen, Tim May on the other side of your screen, and myself, Spencer Holbrook, have to say about this matchup, Ohio State and Nebraska, October 26th, Saturday in the Horseshoe, high noon. It'll be on Fox if you're not there. If you are there, make sure you go to Game Time, get those tickets. GameTime.co on the Game Time app. Use code ON3, get $20 off your first purchase. Andy, I'm going to go to you first. Bold prediction for Ohio State and Nebraska.
We've been talking about it all week. The sacks, they did not come against Oregon on the road a couple of weeks ago. I think they will come this time against Nebraska. Dylan Raiola has been pressured, around 30% of his dropbacks this season. That's been a bit of a problem for Nebraska this year. I think Ohio State gets 4 sacks. Nebraska's currently allowing 2 sacks per game. I think Ohio State doubles that number in this game. I don't know schematically if things are going to look drastically different. I do think, and Tim talked about this earlier this week, I think they'll play more violently, maybe a little bit more free, and I think they'll find a way to get home 4 times in this game.
Tim?
Home sweet home. My bold prediction, I told Denzel Burke this when he walked out of the Whittier's Athletic Center on Wednesday night. He's kind of coinky-dink. He wasn't available for interviews, but he was in a decent mood, man. And I just said, I think this is going to be your big bounce-back game. And I said every big-time quarterback I've ever covered at Ohio State over 4 decades has had a blank game, if you follow my drift there. Fill it in with whatever expletive you want. Denzel Burke will have a minimum 1 interception in this game and bounce back big time. That's my bold prediction.
Wow. Okay. All right. I think Travion Henderson is going to rush for 150 yards in this game.
Wow.
I think Ohio State is going to #establish it on the ground, RTDB, if you will. You all know the acronym by now. They're going to run it. I think Ohio State is going to work to get Zen Michalski comfortable in his new role at left tackle. How do you do that? You establish the ground game, get some confidence in that regard, and then work on the pass game after that. Travion Henderson broke free for a couple runs there against Oregon. Didn't have the night that I think he wanted to. I'm not sure how much run Quinshaw Judkins is going to get as they bring him back from the issue that he's dealing with, that hand procedure he had last week. So all of those factors, plus this Nebraska run defense that I don't think is very good, I'm going to take Travion Henderson to have 150 yards, and then we'll get to see some James Peoples action. I think that's best for everybody involved ahead of this Penn State matchup. So I will take Travion Henderson, 150 rushing yards, as Tim likes to say. Final answer.
Were we picking our offensive and defensive players of the game just then? Did I hear it wrong?
No, but we're about to. Andy's going to give us his offensive player of the game.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Zen Michalski, which we don't usually pick offensive linemen. I know Tim's story about when he picked, I think it was DeJuan Jones, who didn't end up playing in the game.
No, didn't even play.
Yeah. Look, for me, I'm going with the guy who has to step up at left tackle. You lose Josh Simmons for the season. They really like what he was doing. He's got high-end NFL draft prospect status. But, Zen Michalski has not had a lot of experience. This will be, I believe, his first career start, and this is a big position to be in for him, protecting that blind side of Will Howard. His teammates are confident in him. I'm not saying he'll be sack-free. Maybe he gives up 1 sack, but ultimately it's a win if we're not talking about Zen Michalski post-game. I think the best thing for an offensive lineman is to be not talked about, basically, because no one's noticing anything you're doing wrong in particular. So I think it will be that kind of day afterwards that we're not really talking about the offensive line. Things click pretty well. Ohio State has balance. And I think that's the way to beat Nebraska is, having an effective run game and mixing it in with the pass. And I think Zen will allow them to do that.
It's interesting. That's an interesting pick, Anders, because he's got to step up. I mean, Josh Simmons is not coming back. I mean, clearly, they can juggle things on that offensive line and or try some other moves. But like we talked about in our post-practice report, I think on Wednesday or Tuesday, it's like, why do that if you've got a guy who's in line, who knows the tackle spot, left and right, so to speak, and can get after it? Why not move him up and lean on him? They recruited him to play at Ohio State, not to watch. And so that's going to be interesting. My pick is Emeka Egbuka. I know that's way out on a limb, right? But the bottom line is, I think as as really good as Emeka Egbuka is, you defensively, and you saw Oregon try to do it, and they still didn't quite shut him down. I'm talking about Jeremiah Smith. You've got to do something if you're on defense about Jeremiah Smith. And we know, we've said this all along. I mean, Ohio State got beat by 1 point, not by 31 points 2 weeks ago. Emeka Egbuka had a good game. So did Jeremiah Smith in a lot of respects. So I'm picking Emeka Egbuka to step up big time in this game. One of the great leaders that I've covered at Ohio State and spokesman, but now he's going to step up and really, really put the heat on those career records we've been talking about all year.
So the Nebraska defense is interesting because I don't hate their corners, but their pass defense isn't good. It's a weird conundrum that they've got there. So I really do like that pick, Tim, the slot receiver, having a lot of success because, again, I do like Tommy Hill and Sayer Wright, both those corners. I don't think they're bad players. It's just that I don't think they have the full secondary. So I like that pick, Tim, of Emeka, not just because he's a really good player, but because it's an area that I think you can exploit in the Nebraska defense. I'm going to go I'm also going to take an offensive lineman, but it sticks with my theme of the run game. You've got a new offensive line combination in there for the first time this year. Ohio State doesn't do a lot of offensive line combinations in general. They've been pretty lucky and healthy on the offensive line in the last couple of years. You've got to have some continuity there. And I think it all starts up front, and up front, it all starts at center. Seth McLaughlin, the last 2 weeks, has added some real accolades to his resume. He's now a finalist for the William V. Campbell Trophy, first one at Ohio State since 2019. That's a Scholar Athlete Award. Shows the brain and bronze that he brings to the table there for Ohio State. He was a midseason All-American by CBS Sports, by The Athletic, and by the Associated Press, among others. First team midseason All-American. Don't look now, but there's a real possibility that they're planting a Buckeye tree for Seth McLaughlin in his lone year at Ohio State. He's playing at an extremely, extremely high level. The advanced numbers love him. The eye test loves him. He runs his feet in the run game. He's really good in pass protection. I'm super impressed with him. And if you're going to have this offensive line start to get on the same page in a post-Josh Simmons world in 2024, it has to start with number 56 in the middle. And if the run game is going to click, like I think it is, taking Travion Henderson to rush for so many yards, I think Seth McLaughlin has to be a huge part of that. So I'm going to take him as my offensive player of the game. Andy, we're going to the defensive player of the game, defensive side of the football. A lot of question marks for this unit the last couple of weeks since the Oregon game. And now we've got to pick one of these guys to break out and have a great game.
Yeah, going along with my bold prediction, I'm going to pick Jack Sawyer. I felt like he was strangely absent from the Oregon game, just did not get nearly the amount of pressure that you would expect. Even in the pressure stats, of course, no one had a sack for Ohio State. But with my pick of saying there's going to be 4 sacks, I do think that Jack Sawyer will have his hand in at least 1.5 of those. I'm going to say 1.5 for him. He's got 2.5 sacks on the season, so that is pretty bold to say 1.5. But I feel like it's a matter of time before he starts ramping up those efforts. Like I would be surprised if he finishes the season with, or at least the regular season, with only 5 sacks. I think he's going to get over that mark at some point soon. And I think it's going to start on Saturday against Nebraska. And I think that's going to be big for him because I think there's a lot of heat right now that he and JT Tuimoloau are facing from not just the local media, but now the national media, I think, after that game at Oregon.
Tim, what you got?
Well, I was going to pick Denzel Burke, but I used him as my bold prediction. Caleb Downs has got to have that big game one of these days, correct? I'm not sure he's quite had that big game we all expected because maybe we expected too much. But I see Caleb Downs being activated and in a positive way this week. I think he will be playing mind games with Dylan Raiola. Where is Caleb Downs? That'll be the first question Dylan Raiola is going to be asking himself. Well, maybe not the first one. The first one might be, why didn't I go to Ohio State? No, it won't be that. But I see Caleb Downs playing mind games with Dylan Raiola and the Nebraska offense, which is still basically finding its way. It had some early success, as we well know. But Indiana beat Nebraska like Ohio State used to beat Indiana. So bottom line is that's my defensive player for the week, Caleb Downs, safety, The Ohio State University. So what we've done thus far is we've picked 2 former Alabama players. Wait a minute. Yeah, What'd you pick Seth McLaughlin for? Your offensive player of the week? And
Correct.
I'm picking Caleb Downs, my defensive player of the week. 2 former Alabama players stepping up. And by the way, Seth McLaughlin, as you pointed out, Spencer, is so important when you're going against a sort of a weird defense like they're going against this week with that 3-3-5 look where they step somebody up almost every play and go to an even look, even though it doesn't look like it. So it'll be fun to watch Seth McLaughlin figure all that out.
Yeah, there's no more Alabama players for me to pick, Tim, because Julian Sayin doesn't play defense, and he doesn't really play, period. So now I've got to figure out a defensive player of the game. Who do you go to in times of need? You go to your leaders. I think this is a Cody Simon game, whether that's getting creative in the way that they're blitzing, whether that's getting creative in the way that they're using the linebackers differently, whether that's just making stops like he has done all year. I think he's played really well. There was a 2-week blip for the linebackers that I thought they didn't really play that well. Marshall and Michigan State. I think that applies a little bit more to Sonny Styles than Cody Simon, but I still think that he wasn't at his best in those 2 games. Since then, he's bounced back. If there was a bright spot on the defense against Oregon out in Eugene, I thought it was the linebackers. I did think they played a pretty dang good game. And now there's questions flying around about this defense. There's questions about how good this team actually is. Who do you need to rely on? You rely on your leaders. You rely on your captains. He's wearing the Blocko for a reason. I think he's going to come out pretty fired up with this home crowd and look to set the tone for the second half of the year. So I'll take the captain. I know it might be a little bit of a lazy play, but I'll take the captain, Cody Simon, having a nice game to help this defense bounce back in a big way against Nebraska, which leads us, Andy, into our score predictions. Spread right now, I believe, is 25.5. We've already seen one 25.5 point underdog win a game in college football this week as Kennesaw State, winless Kennesaw, took down Liberty. Do we see another 25.5 point dog win a game this week, or is Ohio State going to bounce back in a big way, Andy?
Yeah, I think they'll bounce back. I'm saying 42 Ohio State, 10 Nebraska. I think this defense, we talked, or the national media was talking about this week, how Georgia flashed its 2021 defense against Texas, a little bit of a blast from the past. Of course, that defense was top of the nation in scoring defense, points per game allowed, second in yards per play allowed, and suffocated Texas. I think we'll see a return to the 2023 defense for Ohio State. I don't think I'm sold that we're going to get to see some crazy defensive fronts and weird twists and all these things. I feel like Jim Knowles just finds a way to get back to what was working in 2023. And that doesn't have to be the flashiest thing, but if the guys are attacking the football and they're still just playing harder. I mean, we've seen Jack Sawyer get to the quarterback without crazy scheme. That was Missouri. So this can work. It just needs to work better, and they need to have a different output. So I think the defense will be back to its 2023 form in this game. And I don't think Dylan Raiola will turn the ball over necessarily a bunch of times. I think that was a little out of character for him in the last week's game. But I do think they'll make it really hard for him to get to his second, third reads in this game with the amount of pressure I expect Ohio State to get.
My pick, if Indiana can do it, Ohio State can do it. Show me why Ohio State can't do it. Ohio State 56, Indiana 7. Ohio State 56, Nebraska 7. I mixed up my Freudians there. Ohio State 56, Nebraska 7, just because going back to my original line, if Indiana can do it, Ohio State can do it. Ohio State this is its bounce back game. And then I go back to history. History shows Indiana beat Nebraska last week 56-7. That's the third or fourth time I'm going to say that. I think that's enough.
I'm going to go Ohio State 45, Nebraska 14. I don't think this is as bad as the Indiana game was last week, just because, again, like you said, Andy, it was a little out of character for Dylan Raiola to turn the ball over as many times as he did. I also think it's a little harder to just do anything on this Ohio State defense. So you exchange turnovers for 3 and outs or turnovers for punts, and you have little longer fields. I do think this Nebraska defense puts up a little bit of a fight. And, we talk about this bounce back effort for Ohio State. It's also a bounce back effort for Nebraska. You either get a bounce back from them or you get a 2-week stretch of misery for them. It can go either way. And I'm not really sure which way it's going to go. And 31 points on the road, I don't know if that is a bounce back for Nebraska, especially in a season where they want to be better. So I don't know. I looked at this game a long time ago and thought that Nebraska could be 6 or 7-0 coming into this game. Now you're thinking, well, if Nebraska loses this game, does the second half of the season start to look a little shaky? We'll see. But I think Ohio State's going to win 45-14. And that's where we end this thing because we give out score predictions and then we get out of here and get to the horseshoe for Ohio State and Nebraska, high noon in the horseshoe. We'll see you guys there. Andy Baxter, middle of your screen, he'll be there. Tim May on the other side of your screen, he will be there as well. He's a 41-year vet, of course. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Like the video below. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll see you back here at on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. We'll see you in the horseshoe on Saturday for Ohio State, Nebraska, and we'll see you over at lettermenrow.com.